Texas Chainsaw Massacre is out on Netflix. It's yet another entry in the long-running slasher franchise. Crucially though, it ignores all the movies between the very first one from the 1970s and now. So it's essentially just like a second part 50 years later, much like Halloween was in 2018, and we'll get back to that example. Me personally, I have also just seen the first film and I thought it was good, and then I've never touched any of the sequels, except for this one, of course. Now, interestingly, the movie was originally made by Legendary Pictures and intended for wide theatrical release, but, and I quote IMDb here, Legendary Pictures sold the film to Netflix after a string of disastrous test screenings. This should tell you a lot already, and if it doesn't, be advised, this is one of the absolute worst trash movies I have ever seen in my life. I rated 1 star out of 10, and I genuinely struggle to think of anything that would be worse in my book. Perhaps Zombieverse, but that was meant as a parody, so I guess it gets some leeway that way. Perhaps The Room, but that is an anti-movie basically, so I don't know if it counts either. Anyway, it's also the longest 80-minute film ever. The runtime is short and sweet, but the pacing makes it feel like it's an endless film. It doesn't want to end. The plot goes like this. 4 very unlikable young hipsters travel to a Texas ghost town, a literal small town which has been totally abandoned and is just a bunch of derelict buildings. Their plan is that they want to run an auction on behalf of the bank, I guess. It's all very weird. But they have this large bus of other hipsters coming over to bid on the shitty buildings, and then they all plan to sort of transform this ghost town into a cool new locale for young people with hipster cafes and hipster bars and an art gallery. Who's going to come there and enjoy all those things? Who the fuck knows? Because as I said, nobody lives there anymore, and the city which they come from is 7 hours away from by car, which one of the characters says out loud. So even the most basic setup is just beyond stupid. Anyway, in town, turns out it isn't completely abandoned yet. There's one contractor there working for the hipster kids, who's this asshole, clay of the land Texan guy who likes to walk around with his gun and not be told what to do, who of course quickly proves to actually be a heroic badass when things start going south. And there is also an old, sick lady living in an abandoned orphanage. And the hipsters try to evict her. And then it turns out she was taking care of one last patient, which was this huge, towering man with the man of a child. You guessed it, Leatherface. And from here, the slashing and the killing begins. But wait, there's more. Sally, the sole survivor from the original film, has actually spent the 50 years in between training and waiting and hunting, actually waiting for the day when she finally hunts down Leatherface to take revenge. And so she's coming to town as well. Now, I don't even know where to start with the film. The premise is criminally stupid, and so are the characters. They continually make idiotic decisions, and there's nobody remotely competent in the entire film, including Sally. Her whole inclusion in general just seems like a poor man's version of Halloween 2018, only without a good idea of how to do it, without exploring that character and that trauma, and without Jamie Lee Curtis to kind of carry it in terms of the charisma, and without a good conclusion or resolution, because the confrontation between Sally and Leatherface, when it finally happens, is so underwhelming it made me groan. Going back to the characters, the young ones, it's not just that they're incompetent, it's that there's nobody you can even you can latch onto emotionally. Maybe the first girl that dies, but that's firstly because there is actually some well-built tension in that single scene, and secondly because we haven't yet learned enough about her to make us dislike her, because all the others are just annoying as shit and they get progressively worse with every minute. Leatherface himself should at this point in time be over 70 years old, and yet he still runs around briskly, chasing young people, snaps people's bones with his hands, and is practically unkillable. And the violence he inflicts is pointlessly gruesome and graphic, but it doesn't evoke any emotions save for disgust. And this is actually something I wanted to talk about. It feels like the filmmakers completely missed the point of what made the original first film so great. If you go back to watch it, Leatherface is not just... He's not an unkillable monster in that film. He's just a mentally deficient, huge dude who happens to wreck people not because of some supernatural abilities or his durability, but because he just always gets the jump on them. He has the element of surprise, and it's just over before they can do anything. And further, the film's key asset was not the ultra-violence, which in fact back then was way more implied than shown, but rather this eerie, hopeless atmosphere, which then of course spiraled completely out of control into insanity during the infamous dinner scene, where both Sally and the audience had to suddenly confront just the extreme levels of craziness from the villains, and just going, you know, outside of humanity and seeing what's there. Whereas in this movie, in the new film, it's just kind of another Michael Myers just running around cutting fools. It doesn't carry any weight. And then the whole finale is so overstretched, and it feels like it's just an endless stream of, oh no, Leatherface is about to kill one of the survivors, but oh yes, somebody shows up from off screen to save the day and shoot him, and he's dead finally. Well, no, he isn't dead, he's still coming after us. Oh no, he's about to kill one of the survivors. Repeat the same process about 6 times. I was going, really? Again? Are we still doing this? So by the time the real actual ending rolled around, I just asked aloud in front of my TV screen, what the fuck? As I was stunned by how criminally stupid it was. Also, as a cherry on top, there are a few moments when the film tries to take the piss at the hipsters and young people in general, and it comes off so cringy that I wanted to hide behind my couch. I'll give you one example, which I actually paused the film and wrote down because my head hurt so much. So Leatherface gets on this party bus where all the hipsters are, and he sort of stands there for a second just looking at them with his chainsaw in hand. He's all bloodied. He has the mask of the human face on his face. And no one of the hipsters panics or anything. They all just sort of pull up their phones and start recording him. And one of the dudes actually says, and I quote, "Try anything and you're cancelled." Painful. Painful is what this writing is. So yeah, if you've made it this far in the review, at least save yourself the time and do not see the film, because it is disastrously awful. And in every single aspect. I mean, there's nothing that would save it. It's just horrible, horrible piece of garbage.